Hi, lovely listeners. You might have noticed that we've changed our name for reasons both annoying and legal. Like my kids said when I tried to get them into Sufjan Stevens, it wasn't our favorite, but we've moved on and are excited to be coming to you now in a new packaging with the same great taste as the mother of it all. Want to join our summer book club, participate in a live podcast recording, and suggest topics for our upcoming season finale episode? Go to motherofitall.substack.com to subscribe to our Substack for that goodness, as well as every episode in your inbox, commenting on episodes, reading episode transcripts, seeing bonus posts from us throughout the season and during our summer break, and more. Thanks for supporting us as we continue to explore and expand what this project can and should be. We treasure you. I'm Sarah Wheeler.
And I'm Miranda Rake, and this is Mother of It All, where we explore motherhood through the lens of culture and culture through the lens of motherhood.
Welcome, Miranda. How you doing today?
Good. I'm thinking that we should have said parenthood maybe today.
Oh, do we? Oh, yeah.
But it's okay.
We have to expand. Okay. Do you want to do it again?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Can we do a little an auditory asterisk? Parents. Mothers are parents.
What does an asterisk sound like? Like bing.
When we say mothers, we mean parents, but we're just being exclusive for no reason. Mm-hmm. Just to be awful. Yeah, no, we're expanding today. We're we're going to new places. Yeah. And I feel like in honor of our guest, I should let you know, you probably already heard that I am now in 4th place in my NBA playoffs betting pool. Oh. Yeah.
So what? Yeah. Okay, so tell, as a sports novice, I don't know exactly what that means, but do you win money?
You have a ball and there's like a peach basket up on a board.
Okay.
They were first peach baskets.
And wow.
Well, it works differently. I think that I think there's all kinds of betting on sports. Yeah. That's where I'm a novice. But my brother Ben actually invented this game because he's a nerd. But also he loves basketball, and he invented an algorithm to bet on the playoffs where people put in $10 and they pick 5 teams. And teams get different points based on if you pick a better team, you get fewer points when they win, but a worse team, you get more points. So you're incentivized to kind of take risks.
This is horse racing kind of, right? Where
it's basically
you bet on the right, lose. Yeah.
That's really insensitive to the players of the NBA though.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's like horse racing, but with less hot dogs. Less dollar hot dogs.
Did you bet on a team that's less likely? Did you go all in?
I did a combo. Okay. No, my strategy is don't research, don't really watch a lot of regular season games. And then kind of 5 minutes before the deadline, just kind of frantically pick people.
Is it a feeling?
It's working out.
Yeah. Oh, good.
It's feeling. People do different things. There, one woman, one year, actually she won, but she just picked her teams based on names that sounded like weed. So she chose the Denver Nuggets.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And she actually did really well. So
nice. Yeah. I don't know if this is basketball. I don't know which sport it is, but there's a New Orleans team that apparently their mascot,
yes.
Their
New
mascot
Orleans is a city. Good job.
Is a baby, is a king cake baby. Have you seen this?
Okay.
What? I just learned about this. Okay, so there's a team from New Orleans where their mascot is the little tiny baby that you get in a king cake. You know?
I know the baby.
But it's a giant version because it's a person in a suit.
All right, and we have to introduce our guest because now I'm Phil, do you know about the baby mascot?
I want to talk about the baby, yeah.
Okay. Is that a real thing, Phil?
Yeah.
It's real. It's so scary.
You first of all, believe your co-host. It's a real, what do you, is it a real thing? First down on the podcast, I have to fact check your co-host.
Yes, please.
It's yes and, Sarah. It's yes
Mansplain the baby to us, although Miranda already
Yeah, it's a baby. It's exactly what you said. It's so.
What team is this?
It's the Pelicans. It's unsettling.
The Pelicans have a baby?
Yeah.
The King Cake baby is their mascot in the Smoothie King arena?
Am I wrong that he has a little crown too?
I'm trying to remember it. Like, I think yes. I just was. Oh my God! Yeah, he does. Mm-hmm. Oh Lord, it's so scary.
Yep. Can we get a visual of the baby?
I'm working on it.
Okay. Oh my God, it's horrifying. Oh my God. Oh no, this baby is. It has the crown looks like kind of like a little mohawk. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, oh my God, it's like Chucky level horrifying.
Yeah, the eyes. It's the eyes. You know,
it's nightmarish.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he seems to put his fingers in his mouth a lot. That looks like one of his moves. Well, that's realistic. I feel like we should give them credit for that. Like his tiny little arms.
I can't believe I made it to 4th place right now in my basketball pool without knowing about the baby. I just want to apologize officially, Miranda. You know a lot about sports, and I'm never going to take that tone with you again. And this is another reason why I'm so happy that our guest is here today. Although I wish he'd sided with me, but then I never would have known this baby and we wouldn't have lived in the truth, which is really the goal of this podcast. I first discovered our guest, Phil Maciak, through a review of season 2 of The Bear that he wrote for the New Republic, where he is the TV critic.
Dream job, by the way.
Yes.
It's nice.
And he's not taking it for granted. This piece was tender and thought-provoking, and it pushed me down a Maciak rabbit hole where I learned that he's also a big NBA fan like me and obviously pays more attention to the mascots, that he's a father, and that he wrote a perfect little book. It's like 150 pages.
But the perfect length.
It's perfect. We talk about perfect little books here a lot on screens and what they mean to us. It's called Avidly Reads Screen Time. It's part of the Avidly Reads series put out by NYU Press, which are all perfect little books. Phil is also a professor of English and media studies at Washington University in St. Louis, where he's just wrapping up the semester, which makes it feel even more generous of him to be here. Welcome, Phil.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be on the pod.
Well, we're thrilled.
We're thrilled. This is also a big milestone for us. Yes. You are our first dude, as we alluded to. It's almost the end of the season. We had to meet our quota.
Diversity quota.
I feel it feels like a real responsibility.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You just represent
the
all
bar
dads,
is low.
all men, all You can do that, right?
That's how I normally think of myself.
Yeah.
But here especially.
If you just use like one feeling statement, Phil, by the end of this pod, you will be like you'll be a national hero. Don't worry. There's not a lot.
There's a likelihood of it. I was in fact criticized for using the phrase "I feel like" in the book in a review.
What?
That's true.
Was the review written, I'm just going to take a guess, by a man, or was it a self-hating woman? Okay. Wow. Okay, you're already in for not only using a feeling statement but being criticized. Now you know what it feels like.
I do.
To be constantly, I'll just throw gaslighting out there. I don't even think it makes sense, but I'm going to say that it happened to you so that we bring you into the fold a little bit.
So I feel like that person sucks.
I agree. I agree. I think the description for this episode should be that it's all about how gaslighted I feel all the time.
Well, by the anti-screen industry. Okay, great. We will get into that.
Get into it.
Well, Phil, the first question that we always ask our guests is, who's caring for your kids right now? And I can't, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep making dad jokes. Is your wife babysitting?
No. No. My kids are both at school right now. I have an 8-year-old named Maeve who is at 2nd grade. Actually, she's at a field trip. So she's
end of year.
The theater. Yeah. They have 2 field trips this week.
So does my son.
It's crazy.
He's going on two days in a row. And he was like, can you chaperone? And I was like, no, my whole life would fall apart.
That's amazing. Like, what are the field trips? Are they
so good? Today there's a kind of an air of mystery around today's field trip. It was announced last week.
Like you didn't sign a form?
It was, I did sign a form, but it was like, sign this immediately. They're going on Tuesday.
Yeah. And you're like, what?
And it is a play or a musical. And it is not at any of the theaters in St. Louis. It is at the convention center in St. Louis. It's possible that only second grade is going. It's possible that the entire school is going. It's
Do you think they're getting indoctrinated into a cult?
That was my thought. Or like a pyramid scheme. It's like oils. They're going to come home. Your daughter's going to sell oils.
There is.
Should be like, come to my mimosa party, but actually.
Yeah. The market in second grade is for crystals right now. We can talk about that later if you want. But so it seems like it's based on a picture book. And they're all getting a copy of the picture book, but but it all happens so fast. They're not getting the copy of the picture book until after the play. And the
book's not even out.
Their teacher has been responding to questions by simply saying, I actually don't know what this is.
This is giving cult. This is giving cult. Yeah.
I agree.
Like, do they need to wear like a neutral tone, like head to toe? Or
Maeve is not wearing a neutral tone, so I hope
Thank God. She'll get out.
Please send us a picture of this book cover.
I will, yeah. When I find out more information. It's Dianetics.
I'm really hoping.
Have you heard of Dianetics? Is that a popular children's book?
I think it's great.
It's good. And that's it. So the 8-year-old is at school / a field trip / a cult orientation. And my 4-year-old Phoebe is also at school, at nursery school. This is her last week of nursery school before she'll go to kindergarten next year. And at some point during this recording, she will be picked up by my parents, who will have her for the afternoon.
Oh, you got that parent help.
I do.
What's the system there? You got like do you have like a schedule? Or?
So Phoebe is at nursery school until 11:30 every day. They pick her up from nursery school Monday through Thursday and keep her through the afternoon. And then they pick up Maeve from school, from elementary school at 4 and return them to us at that time.
You know That's what? Adorable. Grandparents.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Are they like younger than my parents?
I don't know how old your parents are. I haven't read your Wikipedia page. Know how old your parents are.
We were talking before we recorded about how my son was like shocked that I didn't have a Wikipedia page, and then apparently Phil doesn't have one.
But he's gonna. I think we're gonna make. I'm gonna make him one. It'll be how we thank him for coming on the podcast.
I'm so sorry for making a callback joke about the filter in.
We love callbacks. I love being asked if I can like repeat something dumb I said earlier. Thank you. That's your parents sound amazing.
They are. They're really great. Yeah.
Wow. That's beautiful.
It really is.
Yeah. Well, screen time and parenting is this topic that's like always kind of at a dull roar. And Miranda and I have been talking a lot about the kind of fever pitch that it feels like it's reached in the last few months. We have Jonathan Haidt publishing his book, The Anxious Generation, and writing like a 10,000 word piece about it in The Atlantic with like a lot of headers and subheaders. I've literally never seen anything like that in like a major media outlet. Where he positions screens as the cause of the rise in youth mental health challenges. And there's been some really interesting responses to his book by Stephanie Murray in The Dispatch, Courtney Tens in Romper, Phil on Twitter, and Melinda Wennermoyer on her Substack, Is My Kid the Asshole, did a really good dive into his data analyses, and a lot of other people. So we knew we wanted to talk about screens here, and it felt particularly imperative to the nuance of our conversation to have a conversation partner who truly loves screens. And so, Phil, that brings me to your book. And if I may, I know you can get embarrassed now, so I am sensitive to that, but I would love to read a paragraph.
That would be great. I could be embarrassed. I can also accept praise.
Great. No, I'm going to criticize it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have
line by line, and I circled all the feels every time you said feel. No, I just that I feel like really made me be like, oh, this is the guy I want to talk to. Okay, you write, Are screens a form of sustenance, a drug, a contaminant of some other kind? It's not just trade press accounts that try to explain screens metaphorically. Even in scholarly research, studies on screen exposure have always been framed around analogies, often hyperbolic or partially considered. If screen time is a problem, is it more like an addiction or a poison? Is it a cause of a disorder or a disorder itself? What existing terms can we use to adequately describe this phenomenon that's so easy to perceive but so hard to quantify? Do we need new terms? So I would love for you, Phil. Are you? Oh my God, he's crying.
Okay. Yeah.
No.
Uncontrollably crying. So you can't see it.
Would all dads cry if they heard that?
All dads. Hashtag all dads would cry.
Well, because they would feel so seen by the complexity of this paragraph. Yeah. So, Phil, I would love for you to just start by giving us your take on what screen and screen time means to you.
Thank you. So I guess that paragraph is in some ways a statement of not a problem, but a sort of constraint that I think I approached this book with, which was to say, I was never planning to offer concrete advice about screens and screen time, in part because in the reading that I had done, again, in sort of academic presses and in trade presses and popular accounts and blogs and things like that, I kept running into people describing the state of the sort of discourse as being one where it's really hard to have concrete knowledge about it, right? To say that screens are doing this or screens are doing that, right? It's easy to say a phenomenon is occurring, but it's very difficult to ascribe it to screens, in part because screens are so at this stage and even for the past decade or so are so integrated into people's lives, right? So it's not like it's not a discrete thing that's easy to test, right? And so I think that I approached the book with the idea that I don't have a sort of a solid understanding of what screens are doing broadly, or even sometimes specifically in my own life. And so what I wanted to do was to just sort of have this, personal accounting of screen time. I have been writing about TV for, 10 years now, more than 10 years. And having kids was a really interesting sort of, it caused a sort of break or self-awareness in the way that I write about TV or the way that I write about screens, because all of a sudden I have to think about, my kids and what their relationship to screens is. I am in control of my own, or not in control as the case may be. But, all of a sudden becoming the sort of director, like the cruise director for screen time for a child, is a very different thing. And it's a different thing because you start hearing all these people telling you what's good and what's bad. And you start hearing all these euphemisms, and you have to pick which one you want to build upon. And so trying to think about my media watching, which I do critically and which I do for a job and which I do out and get a lot of pleasure out of, as something that is related to this vision of what screens are for kids, which is more often than not a vision that's about horrors and scariness and lack of control.
Yeah, well, thank you, first of all, I think as women, thank you for being I don't really, I have to assume humility around this topic. But then also, I think as parents, that, to write a book and not decide you're not going to give advice, I guess, from my understanding of the publishing industry, it reduces maybe the number of copies you'll sell. But
that's
but
my understanding of the industry as well.
yeah. But it's really a beautiful thing. And I can you go into a little bit more of how you feel like your relationship to screens changed when you had kids? You said you kind of had to notice it more, and that you had all this noise around what you're supposed to do. So how have you navigated that?
Sure. So I think that and this is kind of the methodology of the book, but also a sort of approach that I think has been the way that we have approached screens in our kids is just paying attention. You know, I talk about this a little bit in the book, but we followed the now, I think, no longer enforce guidance to wait 2 years to introduce screens to Maeve or
to the first kid.
Yeah. We didn't hold out that long for the second one. But we did that. But at the time when we introduced screens to her, it was, it didn't go from 0 to 60. I think a lot of the times the discourse assumes a parent who has a screen and just sort of pushes it in their child's face at every moment and is completely inattentive to what is happening on that screen. And I think that we can get into this if we get into, hate gate later, but I think that there's, I think a lot of that argument rests on the idea that that's what screen use is like. And that's how people use it, is completely indiscriminately 24 hours a day and without any thought or attentiveness to it at all. And I think coming to this conversation, but also coming to parenthood from a position of all I do is pay attention to media. That's my main thing that I do, is pay attention
and wear hats.
And
Great hats
during the process. But so that's how I approach things, and it struck me as important. And this is, I think, reflected in a lot of the literature that I've read around screen time for this book, that the best thing you can do is not ignore it, right? To talk to your kids about what they're watching, to talk to your kids about what they might want to watch, or what their preferences are, right? I think I have a sense of my kids' taste in what they like to watch, or what they use it for, or those sorts of things. And it just struck me that modeling attentiveness for our kids is what we try to do in all facets of their life, right? So why shouldn't that apply to their usage of screens too? If you're trying to write about screen time, but it's also, I think it's necessary to try, right? Or to at least acknowledge that, the watching an episode of Bluey, or, watching, scrolling through TikTok for 10 minutes, or doing online banking are 3 pretty different things, right? But they all are a screen. Right. And I think that there's insisting on disaggregating those things, or understanding them in relation to each other and in their specificity and in their context, seems like it's important, even though it's very hard. And even though it's incredibly subjective and person to person.
It seems so much like how we talk about Instagram or social media too, where it's like, it can be incredibly toxic.
Yep.
And it can be a place where people genuinely connect and feel less alone. And it's both of those things.
Yeah.
I want to talk about shame and blame for a little bit, because both of you are making me think about that. And I thought about that a lot when I read your book, Phil, that it almost felt illicit sometimes, these passages in your book where you were just letting yourself enjoy screens and enjoy them through your child. You had some lovely passages, and you end the book with this beautiful scene around this app, Star app. Is that what it's called?
I call it Star app. I think it's called.
You can't use the real. You weren't gonna do any promos, right?
Oh no, I name it. It's called Sky Guide, but Maeve calls it Star app, so that's what we call it in the house.
Yeah, where you were just watching your daughter looking, pointing the phone towards the ceiling and kind of looking for constellations. And it was so beautiful. And I noticed when I read that I had this anxiety about about a parent just enjoying using a screen with their kid. And that I have so much kind of self-talk in my mind about how bad that is, that I miss all the fun parts because I feel kind of ashamed to have them. And so, it's like, if my kid catches me on my phone, we have tech rules in our house that supposedly, they're on the fridge. And one of them is that we leave our phones in this place at the front of the apartment. and they're supposed to be there. And like you go there, if it's family time, you go there to do something, and then you kind of leave, and you don't have your phone like kind of hanging around throughout the house with you. That's like a 50-50 success story. But my kids will sometimes be like, tech rules, you know, if I'm like, and then I'm like flooded with shame, or I'll be like, I was talking to Ewow's dad about a play date, you know, like defending myself. And even like with, you know, shows and things like that I really treat it like this drug, where, you know, I'm like, I guess we could watch an Is It Cake tonight, but like only if we're good. And, you know, and then I, you know, or like if they're in bed and they come out and like I'm watching something by myself and kind of like multitasking, I feel ashamed. And I hate that. And I didn't realize how much I hated that till I read you just talking about how much you love TV. You know, that's a specific kind of screen time. And about like, you know, enjoying it with your kid. And I do think it's like something we lose when we demonize something, and kids can tell. I was thinking about, did you guys do Dare?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. When you were like in middle school. Do you remember, like, I remember being like 12 and doing like the Dare, you know, program and looking through the book. And it would always be like this cartoon about a kid who like, you know, tries marijuana because like the kids in the alley that are bigger bully him into it. And then it like ruins his entire life. And that would be the story. And I was like, it felt fishy to me, you know? I was like, there's something that we are missing. I don't believe you, because it can't all be this bad, or we wouldn't be doing it all the time. Right. Yeah. And also you wouldn't feel the need to disparage it in us if there wasn't something good about it. And I feel like I'm doing that sometimes with my kids about screens, and creating this kind of probably ultimately unhealthy relationship to them that's around kind of like shame and hiding versus kind of, you know, being more in touch with what you enjoy and what you don't. That was a lot, but Phil, please summarize it better. No.
To me, that's the central thing. And it was even, you know, even before I started to do the research for this book and read a lot of these, you know, these popular studies and screeds, the thing that, and I think I took this from my own childhood, is that we wanted to protect our kids, and we wanted to help them have a healthy relationship with everything, you know, whether it's screens or whether it's food or, you know, anything, or sports or anything like that. And the sort of central key to that was to not stigmatize those things in any way, to sort of through our actions and through the style of regulation that we would choose for these things, to give our kids a sense that, you know, this thing is really freaking my parents out. And they keep telling me it's very bad. And sometimes I like doing it. And so exactly the sort of the quagmire that you're describing is what happens if you tell your kids this thing is awful constantly, and then they experience it and like it. Like, what is that? Do they feel guilt in relationship to that? Do they feel shame? Do they feel a desire to do it more and to like break rules in order to do it, because they understand that it like bothers or scares even their parents? And I think especially when you read the sort of, you know, like there's a book, I forget what the title of it is, but it's something like the framing metaphor of it is that screens are digital heroin. And and I just think about like what is your kid's reaction going to be to like Bluey if you tell them that it's like a Schedule I narcotic, like that's the way you're talking about it, and they're picking up, even if they're not listening to, you know, the words that you're saying, they're picking up your tone, they're picking up your attitude, and it just terrifies you, and it's dangerous, and you're going to grow up having a vision of these things that is out of sync with their reality. And that vision could be in itself as harmful as anything that could happen to you on a screen, right? That if you have this kind of a relationship that is so fraught from such an early age, that can have its own knock-on effects, right? That are similar to the ones that digital heroin guy would describe for Instagram.
I wonder about like thinking about what you're describing in this kind of shame relationship, like in the context of how important it is what we model for our kids, and as opposed to what we say. And there's actually like a really funny Bluey episode about that. There's more than one.
There's a lot.
Where that comes up, and I think there's one where I forget what the parents are doing, but like it's from the kids' perspective of what they hear, and like half the time the parents, all they hear is blah 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 blah. and so I think, which felt really true. I was like, oh, this is exactly how it feels when I'm talking to my kids. And so we try in our house. We don't have a bunch of rules. I mean, my kids are younger than Sarah's, so it hasn't been like huge deal yet, but and David and I have different ways of being with our phones. I'm always trying to get off of it, and he's more comfortable with his relationship with technology.
I think I do view my phone as heroin in a way, Phil.
I feel like it's a problem. I don't like the way it feels, but I think what I was gonna say is like we do not have TV, like we don't have cable or whatever it is, with ads, which I don't think very many people our age have these days. I don't know. But we limit what is available. And I shouldn't get too much into like what we do have, but it's not Netflix, and it's something else, and it's very controlled. But what the point is, like, our kids don't watch like YouTube Kids.
Sure.
I would never let them do anything that is being fed by an algorithm. We feed them, we decide. And we don't like let them just choose. They don't just like see something with a fire engine picture and they're like, I'm going to watch that show now. Like we vet. And like they watch garbage. I mean, they watch things that I don't think is great. Yeah. Like I'm like, oh, this is really boring, but they really like it. And I'm like, this is fine. And so, but I think like, these are ways that I also try to choose my own like media. Like I don't want a show in the background like all the time. Like sometimes we go to someone's house and like the TV's just on. Yeah. Or like a kid has free access to an iPad and they're like on it all the time. And that, to me, I can see how there is an element of like, you're kind of like missing your life, or like it does feel like, and the parents like don't know what the kids are watching. And to me, I do see how that could be dangerous, right? Like YouTube does like radicalize people. There's a lot of weird stuff out there. And
there's that Momo, right? The Momo that like, remember that thing a few years ago? There was like a really scary thing that, I mean, that probably wasn't true. That would like come in the middle of a kid's YouTube video. And like, it was like a demon or something.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it was called Momo, which is my daughter's name.
I really have seen kids like scroll, like they watch 7 seconds of something and that's just like scrolling to the next thing.
But Miranda, I want to give you a little shit, not because I'm still mad about the King Baby incident, but because when I hear you talking about that, I agree with you. Like, I'm like, I also like, we went to a friend's house this weekend where the kids like do just have iPads and they can kind of watch them indiscriminately. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad we don't do that. Or like, but anytime I have that feeling as a parent, I want to go deeper into it. I feel like something must be up. The way I feel about Dare, because I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, do I really know that? We just don't know that like that kid's relationship with screens is going to be, or attention or passion is going to be worse than my kids. I feel like we're doing a lot of like throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Totally.
And we're also kind of, I think we're nostalgic for a screen-free childhood that doesn't exist anymore. And we're looking for something that's like a projection rather than seeing, kind of accepting the fact that we don't really know how our generation of kids are going to grow up and see the world.
No, totally. I was curious to hear like what feels like rules are, or do you have rules, or what are they? And
you said the thing in your book, you did the Michael Pollan thing that was just like watch screens, Only a little with, what was it?
With friends. That wasn't even friends. Mine though. I will say, I'll credit that to, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. Anya Kamenetz.
Oh yeah. She's great.
Okay. She wrote a book called The Art of Screen Time. That I think is pretty good. It's there's some advice in there, but it's mostly just like a sort of tour through the literature on this. And she's one of the people who's willing to say, we don't actually know. And so, any advice is going to be sort of suspect, but yeah, I mean, I think our relationship to it is we try to, we try to talk to the kids about what they want from the screens, what shows they want to watch. We try to watch with them whenever it's possible. We also do a thing where sometimes if they're watching a show, we'll sit with them and read. And our older daughter has started. Our older daughter has started to do that now with her sister. So like Phoebe will be watching a show, and Maeve will. It's not a show she's interested in or whatever, and she'll sit next to her and read, a book. And so we do that. We also we don't have, they don't in our house have personal devices of any kind. They don't have iPads. My parents have iPads for them, and they use them at their house sometimes to like play games.
It's like candy at grandma's house. It feels like it's like, yeah.
But they also, and my mom is very like sits with them and helps them. Like a lot of the games are like designing a dress or cooking a meal or something, they're games that they kind of play together a lot of the time.
Theft Auto.
Right. Yeah. And my mom was very, our older daughter was the one who sort of bore the brunt of the COVID years. And she sat with her through a lot of that, through the Microsoft Teams and all of that. And so they kind of developed a little bit of a pattern together as like co-users of the screen. So it has a little bit of that to it too. They use screens when we go on long trips. They watch whatever they want, or I download it they can't watch whatever they want. So we download things. But again, it's like I have a conversation with Maeve about what she wants to watch and what we think is a good idea for her to watch during that time. And so, we'll download those sorts of things. And then whatever their relationship to screens is at school is unknown to me. And
yeah, that's a whole other thing. Jessica Gross wrote this thing in the Times last month about school, how, she thinks schools since the pandemic are kind of using screens and technology indiscriminately. And I definitely think there's been an uptick in that.
There was an interesting article, like, I think it was pre-pandemic, that was about, and you might know more about this, Sarah, because it was like Bay Area, but it was basically saying that like, technology in school used to be like only for rich kids. And now it's like mostly for poor kids. And then the really, really rich people are like, oh, we have a screen-free school.
Exactly.
And I was like,
only wood and twine.
Right. Our children write with pencils on papyrus. And anyway, like, but, I think what you're saying, like, my kids get to do like I have like PBS Kids app on my phone and I use that for like crisis moments, and it's like, it's like a super treat. And I feel like that also like is a way that screens help me, like by sort of limiting it at home a little bit, like I can whip out this like ultimate treat, like, okay, yeah, you have to have a shot, but you can play PBS Kids afterward.
Right. Or it still has some power. Yeah. Well, I want to talk about morality. Phil, we're all friends here. We're all parents. And I just got to be honest with you, like and I read this in your book, when you talked about like doing the iPads on long trips, my first reaction is, oh, my kids don't have to do that. Like my kids listen to audiobooks. Like I just want to be honest about, that I'm like, I at least, and I think probably there's an archetype of screen parent that matches me that's listening. Like I'm ticking off these and I don't like it. I don't like it, Phil, because I like you. And I know I'm wrong. It's like, that's when you feel that in yourself, it's bad, but so what is that doing to us, do you think, as parents, that we're kind of, I think it's like the drug thing that we're accounting for every minute. Do you have reactions to that?
Yeah. I think the first thing to say is, oh no, I don't think you're wrong. I think you have a relationship to screens. Your kids have a relationship to screens. They are unique to you, and they're unique to your kids, and they're unique to your relationship with your kids. And I think that there is on one hand, there's what to do about screens. And on the other hand, there's how do we feel about screens? And I think what to do about screens is a conversation that you can have, and you can do research, and you can talk to your kids, and you can talk to, professionals and teachers. And then how you feel about screens is something you have almost nothing to do with, right? It's something that we get, we receive it. And the shame that we feel from enjoying a TV show is a culturally learned shame. Like, there's nothing shameful about, laughing at a funny TV show and having a nice time, right? But there is a very strong cultural sort of push for us to feel shame about that, or to say like, that's my favorite TV show, but it's terrible. Right.
Like totally. It's my feel good. It's my feel good.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's my cheat show.
Yeah. This is so much like food. I mean, my background is in food studies, and then I have a master's degree in food studies and a bachelor's in religious studies. And I'm thinking about both of those things right now.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about
it's food, it's God.
Puritanical kind of American ways of being, where it's like really eager to label things black or white, and then if it's good or bad, and then if it's bad, I just can't have it, which means I actually binge it, and then I just feel terrible about it, which is America in a nutshell, and like the root of all of our problems. And I guess, but I'm thinking about it's such a habit that adults have, right? Like I guess I'm thinking again about the thing where it's like you're scrolling TikTok and you're telling your kid 5 more minutes of screen time, and then get off that thing, and you're just like, oh, and you can't, it's not
one more show, but that's it.
Right. Like, it's interesting to think about it as like fear and shame.
Yeah. Well, also if I can do an experiment, I would like to it's not really mansplaining, because everything you write is so lovely and just curious, but can I mansplain to myself using your words, Phil?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to give myself a little bit more shit in your gentle framing. This is about, you have the sentence in the book that thinking about kids and screens is an easy way to avoid thinking about our own relationship to screens. And I'm hearing that coming up a lot in our discussion. And I'm always interested in projection, like what, in any conversation like this, there's so much projection we're doing, both as individual parents and as a larger society. And you have this paragraph in the book. I promise this is the last time I'll embarrass you, but that I've read this aloud already to Miranda. I called my mom and was like, listen, get a load of this. And because we talk openly about projection. So you say the moral panic about virtual learning, you're talking about the pandemic and kind of, is about what all the other moral panics are about: growing up. This is a growing up that's not just worrisome because of the loss of time and childlike innocence and closeness it implies. What does it mean for our children to grow up different from us? Different technologies, different classrooms, different traumas. The things that seemed real to me when I was growing up might not seem real to them. The things that seem real to them seem unreal, ghostly to me. To raise kids in this particular screen time is to feel the constant, terrifying tug of one's own obsolescence. And I think that goes back a little to the hate gate.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That we're kind of explaining to children how their world, what's happened to their world, when we don't really know the first thing about it. We're projecting our experience onto it.
I think that's really right. I mean, partially because I wrote it, but I obviously agree with myself. But so two things. First of all, I want to credit Sarah Mesley, who's the extraordinary editor of the Avidly Read series, and a good friend of mine who I remember working with her on that paragraph. And so I appreciate that you chose that one to read.
Thank you for naming the women behind your success.
So
we'll
Sarah
put that
Mesley,
on your Wikipedia
please
page.
Please do. Yeah. Owes everything to Sarah Mesley. I think that, so first of all, I want to credit her for that, but it really does. So something I think that I think is true and that I think is worth saying over and over again is screens are bad sometimes, right? Like anything.
Yeah.
It is the way I use my phone sometimes isn't good. And it is harmful to me. Either it is distracting me from things I should be paying attention to, or it is having like a addictive function or something like that, right? It's not always good, and that's true and will be true for my kids. But it's also not. There are good things about it too, and I think that there are putting ourselves into a position where we have to choose one or the other for this incredibly complex sort of mediating machine is setting ourselves up to fail to some extent. I think that there's a line that gets trotted out a lot, and it's been a big part of the sort of hate discourse, which is that corporations are taking our children away. Mm-hmm. The specifically taking our children away, and that framing is really interesting to me. And I think it's very telling. And I think whenever I hear that, I think the thing that is being expressed by that, right? The framework, whether it's corporations or social media or whatever, is taking our children away. Is I don't know what my child is doing on their phone, and I am worried about asking.
Mm-hmm. We've hate. When we keep saying hate discourse, we mean Jonathan Haidt, who wrote the book Anxious Generation that just came out like a couple weeks ago.
But we're not referring to.
We don't mean the HATE. We mean the HAIDT or something like that.
Yes, we can pronounce it differently.
Just to clarify. Just to clarify. All right. Sorry to interrupt. Yes.
No. So I think that I think that a lot of the discourse is animated by anxiety, whether it's, real good self-preserving anxiety, or whether it's culturally created anxiety. And I know that because I feel that anxiety, right? I'm not saying this from a position of like, well, I don't worry about this at all. And I don't think anybody else should either. I worry about it. But I also understand that like worrying is not necessarily the way that leads to the clearest thinking about a subject. And I try in the book, and I try with our kids to be really aware of when I am, acting or making decisions out of fear and anxiety, and when I'm acting or making decisions that are informed by something else, maybe a different emotion, right? Like happiness or pleasure or whatever, or reasoned thinking on the topic, right? But I think that there is anxiety is an enormous part of I think that the sort of discourse around this is about how kids are feeling anxiety about their lives, but I also think that anxiety is a big part of why they're being framed in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we're anxious.
Well, like thinking about anxiety and kind of good and bad and our own relationship with screens and what we're projecting onto our kids and all of these things, and thinking about my own relationship to screens and anxieties about it, like I've been thinking in my own life a lot about like how I know things in my body, and like my job is to try to hear those things. And I think thinking too about the parallels with like food and screens and like not knowing our limits and this fraught relationship with pleasure that I think particularly Americans have, but a lot of people have. And because I was thinking about, I want to teach my kids to enjoy like movies and TV. And my husband and I joke that we've been movie training our 6-year-old because we like to do movie nights with him as a special time together after his sister goes to bed. And it took a while to get him into like movies. But now he is, and it feels really
and
good.
with real people. They're always like, is this real people?
Is this real? Like, it feels so good to sit down with him and have a time where, and I think he can probably tell, I don't know, but like, I feel better because I'm genuinely enjoying the movie. And like, I feel like it's more, you know, quote unquote authentic or whatever, this like moment that we're having together, because I actually want to be there. I'm not kind of being like, okay, kid, like, fine, we'll watch the Octonauts movie again. I'm like, you know what? I've never seen Night at the Museum. Why not? Right. And then like, I'm laughing right along with him. And that's pleasure. And that's real pleasure. And I'm modeling that, and I'm experiencing it with him, and he's experiencing it. And I feel it in my body. I'm like relaxed, and I'm kind of laughing, and there's like this lightness. And then I think about how I am when I'm responding to a million texts on my phone, and my shoulders are high, and my adrenaline is pumping, and like my heart's probably pounding. And if I put my phone down and take a deep breath, like, I'm like, oh wow, every muscle in my upper body is like jacked right now.
Yeah. You know? Sorry, I do send you flurries of texts, Miranda. I'm so sorry. Why aren't you answering?
I've accepted that the text, like, ever since joining school, and I love all these other parents, and I love communicating with them, but whoo, it's a lot. It's a lot of texts. Yeah. And like, you know, I realize it's going to get worse when Nellie has like friends. And but anyway, you know, you do it, but
I have this image in my mind, Miranda, when you're talking of like, when you're talking about pleasure. So first of all, I'm just, you know, that's definitely touching my like shame, illicit taboo, like whatever nerve center is. I'm like, oh my God, it is pleasure. And then I was imagining like, you know, if you were, like if you could post on Instagram, just like, you know, the joy of like watching Fireman Sam with your kid, you know, that you would never, of course, like if I go on a hike with my kids, I'll be like 3 miles done, a lot of snacks, but we, you know, like, and I'm like, I'm the best fucking parent ever. Yeah. But I would never be like, we watched Is It Cake? And then they said one more, and I said, fuck it, you know, and then like, that's not a story, but now I'm like, I'm going to do that. Yeah. Because maybe that's good. The therapeutic process.
And like my kids figured it out. They knew what was cake. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, they knew they're really good.
There's a book called Pleasure Activism that I just have to.
This is all bringing us
like,
back to
I'm so Adrian. Into that. But I really think, you know, one quick little diversion. I'll say it quick. I used to work at a chocolate shop. And we made these amazing chocolates by hand, me and this woman. And like, this was a long time ago, but it was a delightful job. And people would come in, and we didn't have very many offerings, and they were all perfect, to be honest. Not because of me. This was the woman I worked for. I bet did what she told me. I enjoyed it.
I bet you make a nice little. It
was fun. I'll send you some chocolate sometime. Oh, but but so people would come in, and they would say, you know, well, which one should I get? And I would say, well, you know, we only have a few. Like, you just, what sounds good? Do you like lavender? Do you like peppermint? Do you want dark chocolate? Do you want, well, you know? And it would be like, oh, I should try, you know, I should get the blah or whatever. Or they would put it in their mouth, and they would be like, now what am I tasting?
Yeah.
And it was
people are so bad at knowing what feels good to them.
Yeah.
Because there's so many stories, like Phil is saying, you know, it's a cultural construction when I'm feeling shame that I'm watching, you know.
It was so painful, and it was so educational. Like, wow, you want me to tell you what you're tasting? Like, and if you like it, like, what?
Come on, person.
What the heck? Like,
yeah.
And so I think that ties into this, like, I realized how disconnected we are from pleasure and just joy, and like, it's so fraught with this idea of what we should feel, or, you know. And I think so reconnecting with like our bodies, like like the idea of like, well, you should just make your own screen rules that what feels good for your family. But I think a lot of people don't know what feels good, and that's how Jonathan Haidt like sells books, right?
Yeah,
like, and that's
I'm just gonna make I feel like I'm already getting better just listening to you talk, and both of you, and I just want to say that when I watch Top Chef, I feel my chest gets, you know, filled with light and love, and
there you go.
That's real.
Heck yeah.
Well,
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Yeah, you're supposed to reflect it. You're back to me. I want to ask you, Phil, about your students. You talk in the book about, you're with. So one of the things that pisses me off so much about the hate of it all, and I haven't read the book, so I could be wrong. I've been wrong about things already today. Is that like we're just having these conversations about children and without fucking asking them at all, and nobody talks to them about their experiences. I'm an educational psychologist. I did my dissertation, which still did not get me a Wikipedia page, about like, basically it was like, ask kids was my dissertation. It was like, you want to know how kids feel? Fucking ask them. And I I had to make a whole thing to be like, talk to kids. And then I would go into schools with my little, my little self-survey that was my dissertation and my little, skirt suit, and talk to kids, and they had so much to say, and even their teachers would be like, I didn't know that. I'd be like, well, did you ask them? And I asked my college-age niece about this topic. I told her about you, Phil, and she's into it. She's a fan, and she was like, we don't know how screens have affected us. Yeah. Like the jury is totally still out. Yeah. And she was like, honestly, it makes me mad that adults are like having these made up conversations about how shitty we are. And, and you talk to young people every day. So how do you feel like that factors into the dialogue that we're having about screens and kids? And what do you hear from the youth?
So I think so a couple of things. I think that the main critique that I have of this discourse is very much what you're describing. One of which is that it really wants to, because it feels it needs to focus on big general statistics, right? Yeah. People are lonelier than they ever were. If I have to hear one more person tell me that people are lonelier, I'm going to lose my mind. But people are lonelier, or like I was rereading the one of the excerpts from Anxious Generation, and a big stat for these people is that Gen Z is having a lot less sex than other generations.
Oh God, they're so obsessed with that. Oh my God. And nobody for a second is like, could that mean anything positive?
What does that mean?
Let me tell you about the sex I've had,
exactly.
Phil. A lot, a good percentage of it we could have done without.
So there's this real desire to find generalization, right? Find solid or like good generalization. And what that does is it de-emphasizes what you're describing, talking to kids. And I think a lot of the young people who get roped into this discourse are people who have like written an op-ed about how they have a bad relationship with their phone, or they've written a piece of commentary or given an interview with a student newspaper about their relationship to screens.
And the New York Times loved the Luddite kids of New York. They did like 9 pieces on them, and they're great
and good for them. That's their relationship, and I liked that article because it was kids talking about what their relationship with the screens were. And I don't want to judge that. I write about this a little bit in the book, and it was obviously in a pre-smartphone age, but like I had a big like Luddite phase when I was a kid, or like the version of Luddite that you can have, when you're 16. But so I think that there's a lot of kids' voices missing. And then the other thing and we talked about this a little bit already, and this is kind of what my book is about, is an inattention to what's on the screens, right? There's very little explanation or consideration about what these platforms are and how they work and how they're different from each other, how TikTok is different from Snapchat, and Snapchat is different from Twitter, and Twitter is different from Facebook. And some kids, to some of like my students, Facebook is like saying, oh, well, did you see this post on the Gutenberg Bible, right? That it's so abstract and distant a technology to them, but it all gets lumped in as if they all work the same way and they all interact with kids the same way and they all offer young people the same things, and they simply don't. And I think that, there was somebody posted, and it wasn't really about this. It was about, I think it was about people doing political commentary on TV. And the point that they made was, that there are very few people who talk in public about media who approach it from a media studies point of view, meaning that people are talking about media from a political standpoint, they're talking about it from a psychological standpoint, but there's very little representation in sort of, popular pundit media of people who are invested in talking about media from the perspective of thinking critically about media as a form or as a series of forms. And I think it's something that's missing from this discourse is a media studies style attentiveness to the differences between these things people do on screens. And I think that, coming back to the students that I interact with, they all have really different relationships to these things, and that they have evolving relationships to these things, even over a period of 2 or 3 years, right? The students who were in college during COVID have a really particular relationship to screens. And some of that relationship was about the screens like saving them, and some of that relationship is about screens suffocating them, and I think that, it was a really, I will always remember the conversations amongst faculty that I work with, who occupy a variety of generational points of view, from I'm a late millennial to Gen X people to boomers who are in the department. The way they talked about what it would mean to shift to online instruction for the period of time that we had to, was not the same conversation that the students were having about online instruction. Right.
Yeah, I had that experience too when I was teaching during the pandemic.
And it was really, it was revelatory to me to some extent, because it made it clear to me how difficult it would be to generalize about this topic.
What was the difference? Like, if you could sound like, what was different between the faculty and the students?
So the students were, it was not a big deal to be on the screens for the students, but they had a very strong sense of like what worked and what didn't about it. But it was very pragmatic to a certain extent, like, oh, I hate this, or, oh, thank goodness this class is hybrid, or, I'm happy to see my friends on the screen, right? That kind of a thing. Whereas amongst the faculty, it was like, can I translate my pedagogical practice that I've developed in the meat space of the classroom to this tin can with a string attached to it. That is, it was almost like an existential difference, right? With the students, it was, this is good, or this works, this doesn't work. But it wasn't screens, teaching on screens, right? Whereas
it wasn't moral.
It wasn't moral. Whereas there was this real, can I be me on a Zoom screen? Is my soul visible through this medium? And it was it struck me as a very, I don't know that digital native is a really useful framing for this, but it did feel like there was just simply this works for me or this doesn't work for me about the screens for the kids. And that's saying it didn't work for a lot of them, right? And a lot of students have had a very long path back to whether it's their academic performance, whether it's their mental health. It's been was a roadblock, right? But the screen itself was not the roadblock in that situation, right? The global pandemic was the roadblock, and the screen was a manifestation of it and part of it. But also, there wasn't a sort of, I reject this as a concept. Whereas I encountered that a lot with other teachers during that time. I reject this as a concept.
Yeah. I mean, I think it brings up that there's lots of big reasons why it's a really hard time for young people. It's Courtney Tens, when she wrote in Romper about the hate book, she wrote about this kind of teaching kids to like being nostalgic and trying to like make kids kind of do what we did in the 90s, basically, that like we're parents. Yeah. We're maybe later millennials, and we're trying to get our kids like flip phones. Right. And she's like, okay, maybe that will do something. Maybe she said like, maybe they'll even learn some responsibility by getting jobs at the mall. Right. And then she's talking about the world that they live in. She says, if they're lucky enough to live within walking distance of one that's still open, it won't necessarily slow climate change or reverse learning loss or stop any wars or bring back the joy we had living through the 90s latchkey childhoods. But it will give us some illusion that we are each as individuals still in control of our child lives, at least those of us who can afford to be. And it speaks to kind of that, that things have just changed. Like, I feel like as a culture, we're really stuck in this place of wanting to go back. And some of us, especially for our children's sake, and it's keeping us from recognizing what's here and kind of looking at what we have to work with, and acknowledging that, I mean, I do think there's, when I talk to teachers and therapists, there's certainly more demand for support with like anxiety and mental health with young people right now. I think that like in terms of large statistics you talked about, Phil, like that does feel real. Now, part of it I think is always about increased awareness and kind of increased language, that like every second that these kids are on social media, they're getting better at being like, I feel anxiety, and just kind of their feeling statements. But it's also that like it's a really, we're anxious because of how the world is. It's a hard time to be alive. And if we keep like pretending it's the 90s and which by the way were bad in a lot of ways. I was going to say, this
like, we've talked about this before,
we had like a
good.
Yeah, we had like a, sexual predator. Well, for a president, okay, this isn't making it sound like much change.
Once we had.
But where like nobody was criticizing it, I would say was the difference, No, we were neglected quite a bit. I was a latchkey kid. It wasn't awesome.
We gotta another thing to evaluate your relationship with is nostalgia. It's like, it's nostalgia. Like I talked about this before, but the word is acute, painful homesickness. This is not a good feeling to spend a whole lot of time in, right? Like I think it's sort of like a symptom of our like anxiety that we've decided that the past was golden and now is, and it also reminds me of like jokes that I'm sure we all made about like our grandparents, being like, oh, everything was great, after the war. And like, that wasn't true. And like, so I think I catch myself being like an old fart, where I'm like, well, TikTok is the devil. And, there's, I would never, like, what is Discord? I tell you what, I'm never going to learn. And like, I don't want to be that person. I see the knee jerk, like arise in me. And I think about, like, one of my grandparents, until like the day he died, was so curious about the world, like, and he was always an early adopter. Like he got a computer and he was figuring it out, and he was, spamming us all with weird emails, as soon as he figured it out.
Grandparent stuff.
I would chat with him. And actually my other grandma would chat with me on AIM, like when I was away at college. And she did it wrong. Like it would be an email, basically.
Yeah, several paragraphs.
Yep.
My dad still does that.
She'd be like, love Graham Ruth, and
sign off.
I'd be like, Grandma, I'm right. I'm here, Grandma. Okay, never mind. But she was doing it. She wasn't like, this must be the devil. Like, and so, and I think it made her like young, and it kept us connected, and we were using it differently, but we were using it together. And that I think is a reasonable goal and a way to like push ourselves a little bit. Like you're saying, to listen to our kids and maybe just be like, I don't really understand this thing you're using. Can you show it to me?
Yeah. Right? Like, without shame. I'm thinking too of, I'm sorry, there was this, if I can just hate on David Brooks for 1 second, there was this David Brooks piece in the Times like a year ago about how nobody's polite anymore. It was like about how everyone's rude. And he was talking about like, he was talking about like the 60s and 70s and stuff, and talking about how like, how like everybody was nicer. there was just no acknowledgement of being a white dude. It was just like, yeah, the 60s were great. I don't know what we're talking about. Everybody was so sweet.
Famously polite decade.
Yeah, famously polite. And it made me so mad. And it was also that same like judgment in the like young people aren't having sex or they're all anxious because they're on their phones, of just like no curiosity about how young people are making sense of the world.
There's like Gen Z New York Times has like a columnist who keeps writing columns like, old people keep asking me how much I'm having sex and it's making me uncomfortable.
No. Oh my God. Yeah. I basically have my niece, Jasmine, who's 20, who like, I just have her on the line being like, can you explain, like, do we like Ariana Grande? And I also, I mean, she's a Barnard student. She's been plugging me in a lot to what's been going on there. And it's wild. I mean, that's another example of, it's such a stark example with the student protests of how out of touch a lot of the media is with kind of what youth are actually experiencing. Though some people have done a really good job, like your colleague, and in kind of raising the voices of the youth in that. Okay, Phil. Well, you have papers to grade, but I have to ask you. I've been so excited to ask you about Frog and Toad.
Oh yeah.
We like to kind of end with culture recommendations.
Sure.
And you wrote this piece back in 2020 for Slate, commemorating the 50th anniversary of Frog and Toad. I lied. That is the first time I encountered your writing. I did read that when it came out. Mac Barnett, one of the authors that you quote, is a good friend of mine.
No.
Yeah, and then you thanked him in your acknowledgments in your book. That's how I realized you wrote that piece.
That's right.
That was so sweet. You had great acknowledgments, by the way. I love the acknowledgments.
Thank you.
Always, I read them first. But anyway, so you wrote this lovely piece about Frog and Toad and why it's so, why it's so special in the canon. And I was wondering if you have a favorite Frog and Toad story.
Oh man.
I know.
That's tough.
Geez, I do though. I do.
Yeah, I know.
Go back and forth. So
you could say top 3 or top. I feel like you could.
Well, there's only like you point out in the piece, like there's only, like 20? How many stories are there?
20. I think there's 4 books, and they each have like 5.
They each have 5 stories.
Although there's one of the 4 is kind of
a phone in. Oh wow!
I don't know.
Yikes! Well, so let me get out ahead of this. I will say, so that piece, I really loved writing that piece. That was something that I pitched at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was a very long process because, like, the moment that I pitched it, everybody, all the venues were like dried up their freelance accounts, and so that was a thing that it took a long time. But I did, it was this like defining time of the early pandemic for me, was that I would have these long phone calls with children's authors about Frog and Toad. And the thing that really struck me, I think I maybe mentioned this in the piece, like everybody I talked to, I asked them what their favorite one was, and they were like, "It's the dream one." Because it's so hard. Strange and bizarre. And
that's the one
like
where
psychologically complex.
Toad is shrinking.
Yes,
right.
That is correct.
And he's like doing the ballet.
He's
freaking out.
Yeah. I mentioned that because they all said that. I'm not a children's author, so that's not my favorite.
I used to listen to an audiobook of those, and I just can remember in my mind, like, Toad fell asleep and he was having a dream.
I think my favorite is Buttons. The one where I think Toad loses a button from his favorite jacket, and Frog spends the entire story trying to find it for him. And what he does is finds a bunch of different buttons, and that none of them are the right button. And there's this great moment of like exasperation where he goes, he says something, I'm going to misquote it. It's something like, the world is full of buttons and none of them are mine. And then he makes a coat out of all of the lost buttons that they find and gives it to him, and it's like this wonderful thing. I think that's my favorite. It's got the like good shaggy dog structure to it. It's very much about their relationship, and it's I think it's a really funny one because I like it when they interact with the other animals in the forest. That's one of my favorites.
Yes,
the bathing suit one is like this too, where they come up and they're like, why won't he come out of the pond?
Have you seen the musical?
I haven't. No.
Okay, I've seen it twice. It's actually pretty great. And they do like a song, they're like, Toad looks funny in a bathing suit. So that's always what I think of. Yeah, the musical is good. It's kind of like the dinky theater that I took my kids to.
Right,
Very different from whatever your daughter's doing today, which is incredibly
we
adult.
We don't know what she's doing.
If we ever find out. But then I was actually like, all right, this slaps. Like the Frog and Toad musical slaps. There's some good songs.
Sarah, do you have a favorite Frog and Toad story?
I think, I feel like this is kind of basic, but I like what's it called? Where the one where they like go to clean up each other's gardens.
Oh,
like
it's
each
called
other's lawns.
It doesn't say leaves or anything. It's like
yeah. I think it's like
the
something
surprise.
about the fall.
It's called the surprise.
That is what it's called.
Yeah. That frog is like, I'll go, his lawn is so messy. I'll go rake his leaves. And then the other one does it for the other one. And then a storm comes and their leaves get all messed up. So neither of them know that the other one raked their lawn. But the point is that they both have the satisfaction of having done this beautiful thing for each other. And then they come back to their house and they're like, well, my lawn is messy, but that's okay. Cause like I gave to my friend. I feel like that is like the, beyond like better than the Bible, like kind of parable about like the joys of giving. And like, or like in Jews, we have like the ladder of tzedakah, which is like this kind of hierarchy of giving. And like the highest rung of the ladder of tzedakah is like doing something that you'll never get credit for. And to me, that's like the ultimate. But of course, it actually becomes this selfish thing because they both feel like so proud of themselves. But it's all good.
I love
that. What about you?
Oh, gosh, it's so hard to choose. Like in February, I like to read The Corner because it reminds me that spring is coming.
Yeah.
And then like I also like the Buttons one. I don't know. I love cookies. I love Christmas.
Oh, cookies. The cookies where he like is progressively trying to hide the
Anyone where they're just freaking out, which is like most of them. But I have to ask Phil, I want to ask just really quick, what is your favorite TV show? Since you're a TV guy.
Ever? Or right now? My favorite.
You're loving Shogun. Huh?
Ideally,
I really like Shogun. My favorite show ever is Mad Men. It's what it is. When we were writing the book, Sarah was just like, you can write about Mad Men for one chapter. You can't write about it for all of the chapters.
This is your editor, Sarah, not me. I would have been like, you. Whole book.
Yeah, my editor.
Let's go.
She was just like, you can't. There's just too many of your ideas are focused on insights you have about specific Mad Men episodes.
What's your favorite kids show?
Ooh, that's a great one.
Tough. How about other than Blue?
Yeah, I was going to bracket.
Let's just like set to the side.
And do you
Bluey's
agree
not
with
a kid's show.
Kamal Bell wrote this beautiful piece in his Substack like last week, where the title was "Bluey is the Breaking Bad of family television." Agree or disagree, Phil?
I don't. What was the asterisk sound we decided on? Was it?
Bing.
Yeah. Okay. So it's an agree kind of. I think that it's. I agree with the broader point that there is this kind of the past like 20 years or so, there has been a like corresponding renaissance in children's television.
Yeah.
But I would also say that has happened in picture books as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
the picture books.
Ari, your buddy Mac Barnett.
Yes.
And all of his friends and compatriots, like there is a real attentiveness to the sort of form of kids TV and kids literature over the past couple decades that I think is like our kids are eating very well in terms of media that they could consume.
I agree. That's
I feel
well
like we
said.
stumble into like good shows. Like, have you the new Muppet Babies? Like new now.
We were just watching that.
New Muppet
so
Babies?
Underrated.
That
show is. I cried in the finale. It's very
good.
I was like, why is this so good? And why isn't anyone talking about this? Like,
this is where when people say the internet is like so smart and it's taking over and like serving us, I'm like, nobody told me about the new Muppets, so it's not that good.
Over. There's only 3 seasons,
but it's all on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
The kids shows, I'm going to plug 2 things that I really like. I write about this a little bit in the book. I think Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is one of the greatest shows of all time.
We're not worthy.
Yeah. And, but in terms of like contemporary children's TV, Netflix had this like period of time where they were putting a lot of energy into, like essentially doing what the dream was for all of these like streaming platforms, which was like finding smart people and giving them unlimited resources to make TV shows. And they were doing this for kids TV. And two of the shows that came out of that are She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. Which on Netflix, which is really good and funny and smart.
What age, like roughly?
Maeve watched it probably when she was 6, but I think it would scan a little better for slightly older kids. It's serialized episode by episode, so it's like you have to watch it in order, and and it's really good. I would say Hilda on Netflix.
Oh, I love is incredible. Hilda. Hilda is so good, and the movie's really good. And the books are great.
And then there's this one season. Kamau Bell writes about it in the piece. There's this one season show called City of Ghosts on Netflix. It's about. Have you guys seen this? So it's Elizabeth Ito, who I think came from the sort of Cartoon Network, coaching tree of all of those like esoteric, adult cartoons. Yeah. She created this show called City of Ghosts that's about Los Angeles. And I think it's 6 episodes, and it has this, it's like it's like a quasi animated documentary about LA neighborhoods and gentrification. And it's the premise of it is that it's a group of kid ghost hunters, and they go around interviewing ghosts, and the ghosts tell them the stories of the neighborhoods that they occupy. And so there's a story about Chinatown, and there's a story about like an indigenous population that used to occupy the Los Angeles basin, and it's funny, and it's sweet, and it's really informative, and it's incredible. Kids like it, adults like it. I would highly recommend.
That sounds like artful, productive nostalgia.
Oh, that's for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Oh, and like education, like downright educational. I think that's so. The Hilda recommendation made me think about the Apple TV Harriet the Spy.
Oh yeah,
with like Riot Grrrl music and like I
rewatched the Michelle Trachtenberg one with my kids from the 90s
because
we read the book, and it actually it holds up. You got Rosie O'Donnell in like a Newsies cap, and
it's on our list. It looks so fun.
But I didn't know there was a show. I need more screen time, I think, is what we're
I think that's what
discovering.
We're landed.
Well, I will plug both. Phil, you also to go in the other direction, you have some beautiful content breaking down why Paw Patrol is just terrible with Anne Helen Peterson. I will put that link in the chat. Yeah, and then Mac Barnett and John Clausen are actually launching a Substack called Looking at Picture Books.
No.
Where they're going to kind of break down for people why like good picture books are good.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you for your work, Phil. Thank you for spending way longer than you should have talking with us. We hope your students all get A's.
They might.
Just give them all A's.
Why not?
I'm simply refraining from confirming what you're saying on tape.
What you? Oh, right, yeah.
I'm silently. I'm hearing what you're saying.
Blink twice if you're going to give out your students all A's. We know you're thorough. You can follow Phil on Instagram at phillip.maciak. You can check out his work in the New Republic. He's constantly writing new and wonderful things about screens and being unashamed, though not uncomplicated, about his love for them.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Phil. It was nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks for listening to The Mother of It All. And like my dad always said, want to watch some TV?
The Mother of It All is produced by Opus Nox Media with music from It's Electric. You can follow us on Substack at motherofitall.substack.com, where subscribing will get you episodes and bonus quotes in your inbox, chat and comment features, episode transcripts, and more. And on Instagram at The Mother of It All. We know you are profoundly busy, but if you like listening and can manage to follow, rate, or review us in a small moment between leaning in and having it all, it will help us reach a wider audience and meet our stretch goal of getting Michelle Obama on the pod. Thanks for your support. Now get out there and have a totally passable day.